I don't see, from my perspective, a lot of understanding about what's actually wrong with the economy. So I wanted to try to explain in just a few words how I see it. In the same way that it's the government's responsibility to protect our borders, something we hear a lot, the government has a responsibility in a modern economy to balance supply and demand. And you can have too much demand, and you can have not enough demand. The supply pretty much is what it is. I mean, that's determined by long-term factors like people's skills, their education, the human capital that's in the country, the natural resources in the country, and so on. We do have the ability to make $14 trillion worth of stuff, goods and services, and that includes what we export. What the government needs to do is to create $14 trillion worth of demand for those goods and services, or at least see to it that there is $14 trillion worth of demand, whether the government does it or the private sector does it. We're actually right now at around 13. So we're about $1 trillion short. And what's happened is that we've developed over time big leaks in the economy that actually a progressive can well understand. One of the continuing leaks in the economy is the fact that we import $500 billion more each year in goods than we export. And that's something that people have been noticing and complaining about now for literally more than a decade, the fact that all the stuff that you go and buy in Walmart is made in China. The primary reason for that is that the Chinese are manipulating our currency and have been doing so now for quite a long time. So the US currency is artificially high because the Chinese keep printing their red pieces of paper, their red rectangles, and using it to buy our green rectangles to the tune of over $1 trillion at this point. And the result of that is that that gives them an artificial advantage in manufacturing that, and not just in manufacturing, but in other areas as well, that we can no longer compete against. So we have that continuing $500 billion leak in the economy. We have a situation which is getting worse and worse as a result of the enormous disparities of income in this country, which is very simple. The rich don't spend all their money. Every time a rich person makes $1 and doesn't spend that dollar, that's $1 that's taken out of the economy. Now, the poor, God bless them, they don't have that problem. They spend all that they can get their hands on because they need to in order to survive. And in general, in America, so does the middle class. The savings rate for the middle class is close to zero. It's been close to zero now for a long time. If you have a country, let's say, where you have two groups of people, the rich and everyone else, and the rich, let us say, make 2 out of the $14 trillion of income that's produced every year. And then everybody else makes their $12 trillion and spends it. If the rich make $2 trillion and spend only $1 trillion, you are screwed. You have a $1 trillion shortfall in the demand in the economy. And of course, you could have the Rand Paul solution to that problem, urge them to buy another yacht. Or, you know, what we saw for many decades in this country, the progressive solution to this problem, which is called progressive taxation. Progressive taxation has collapsed. The effective rate on large corporations of income tax is a joke. It's going to be close to zero this year, thanks to provisions that were actually voted on as part of the so-called tax compromise last year. The corporate collection of income tax in this country was about $140 billion, and as part of that bill, which I voted against, we gave them a $150 billion tax break. So it's going to be, you know, really close to zero this year, the corporate income tax collections. And the same thing is true of the effective tax rate on the rich. First of all, as Leona Helmsley reminded us, only the little people pay taxes. Secondly, the big people pay them when they feel like it, because unless you sell your asset, there's never any taxation on the gain. Let's say, for instance, that you own a business that's worth, I don't know, $10 million. You can go to the bank and say, hey, bank, I own a $10 million business. Lend me $1 million. And then you can just spend it. You can spend on whatever you want, the borrowed money. It's borrowed money. You get to write off the interest that you pay on the money, as if you can convincingly argue that it's some kind of business loan. And the money that you receive is not counted as income, so you never pay taxes on it. If you do deign to actually sell your asset and you hold it for more than a year, you pay no more than a 15% tax rate, when people who work for a living pay as much as now 36, if you count the phase-outs of the deductions. The result of that is that we have an enormous leak in the economy called the money that rich people get that they don't spend. And the same thing is true of corporations. I mean, it's been well documented that corporations, large corporations in America have $1 trillion in cash in the United States. They have even, the huge amounts of money that they've kept overseas in theory. I mean, overseas for a company like Pepsi just means some papers in a drawer somewhere in the Cayman Islands. And of course, the banks have withdrawn huge amounts of cash from circulation. The banks now have $1 trillion, and that's with a T, $1 trillion on deposit at the Federal Reserve. It's more than $1 trillion. And the Federal Reserve is paying them tens of billions of dollars in interest in our money each year so that they won't lend to us. I talked a little bit about this on Bill Maher's show last month. It's the Republicans who keep saying over and over again, well, if they just had more money, they'd hire more people. No, I'm sorry, that's just not it. They ought to know better since they claim to have some kind of economic expertise. So before you get to their whole shtick about these future liabilities, the fact that we supposedly owe X trillion dollars to pay this government benefit and that government benefit in the year 2043, just talking about where we are right now is that there are these tremendous leaks. The other side is clueless about them. And the only known solutions to these problems are the progressive solutions, starting with progressive taxation. Without progressive taxation, you cannot have anything resembling a balanced demand and supply in the economy. You just can't. There's no way to do it. Without having some serious oversight of the banking system that actually leads them to lend, you can't have any sort of consumer demand that would sustain the economy. The war cost us $157 billion last year. The tax cuts for the rich cost us over $90 billion last year. Those two things were essentially just removed from the economy. Those two things alone, just those two things alone, are enough to create 8 million jobs in this country, paying $30,000 a year. Just do the math. $240 billion divided by 30,000. That's 8 million jobs that we could create just by ending the tax cuts for the rich and ending the wars. So these are the real problems that face us economically, and we have the solutions. And I think we should tell people that.